Good morning, everybody. I'm Hap Skippers. I'm delighted to be with you in this way, but I'm mostly devastated to not be with you physically. This is my first conference of ICTM that I missed in about 15 years, and I also have very fond memories of Ghana, working with airway musicians and Ga musicians, and hanging out with Katie Johnson and Professor Nick Tia. Ghana is such a rich place for our discipline. So I'm sure you're enjoying yourselves enormously. Today I want to share some thoughts about something I've called Beyond the Field, mixing ethnographic skills and common sense as a recipe for success in applied projects. This, for me, academically goes back about 10 or 15 years, but practically goes back about 4 decades when I first started doing things outside of academia. And it's also important to notice that I'm not the only one who does this kind of work. I've just focused a very large part of my career on it, so maybe some of my insights and experiences can help to enlighten you. What I want to be talking about is something I call speaking music to power. I think we are very strong in the depth and the nuance we have in our methodologies working with communities. However, perhaps we sometimes underutilize those skills in securing outside sources of funding and support for projects that matter to us, which seems to be a stronger and stronger aspect of our work with applied and public-facing ethnomusicology on the rise. So there's both room and a need for more insightful approaches to working constructively with power structures, like public authorities, institutions, NGOs, funding bodies, and businesses. Very often we still hear that the most subtle approach to what we do within the communities, but then as soon as we deal with power, with authority, it's just that they don't want to do things. So we see them as a concrete wall. And my argument is that with ethnographic skills, we can get through or around that concrete wall. So our challenge is, how can we best motivate those in power to help us turn music projects with aim beyond academic impact into reality, benefiting musicians, communities, and others? A key concept in this arena is transferable skills. Over the past 3 decades, applied ethnomusicology has taken a flight within our discipline. A key aspect of this addition to our methodological repertoire is working beyond academic contexts. I think the seasoned ethnographer has skills in close reading, careful analysis of data, communicating with people from a wide variety of backgrounds and with different cosmologies, as well as staying alert and clear-headed at crucial moments. It's kind of an idealistic view. I think it's more Morgan Freeman than most of us. But still, all these qualities can be applied in many different circumstances beyond the field. We have to realize that most ethnomusicologists will do at least part of their work outside of academia after graduation, partnering with communities, with festivals and events, with museums, with education institutions, with NGOs, with media, and with the music industry. And all of these can be highly rewarded if approached with the right skills and common sense. There's many examples of projects I can give and you can think of, and probably you've been involved with some of them, like setting up workshops with or for specific communities, organizing festivals and events, creating education opportunities for diverse communities, writing or publishing about music for a broader audience, like through the press or through blogs, or running things like record labels or magazines. Exploring such options may be both highly alluring, as a career in academia gets more and more challenging to negotiate almost everywhere in the world, and I can tell you many horror stories about this from my recent travels, and also intimidating, as we almost inevitably get to work outside of our comfort zones. But most importantly, it can be very exciting and very rewarding. Based on almost 40 years of my own personal experience with this kind of work, and hundreds of hours of conversations with colleagues who have pursued this path, and many of them are amongst you, I'm convinced of the superpower of a recipe to which we all have access, a killer cocktail mixing 7 ingredients of ethnographic skills with common sense. And I will try to name some of those ingredients. The first of these ingredients is developing your idea. It's really important to have a very clear concept of what you want to do, and also to be able to communicate simply and succinctly what it is and why there's a need for it. Sometimes we forget this. Sometimes we also forget to do this in a way that does not only align with our own passions, but emphatically also with the goals and ambitions of the organization from which we are seeking support. Everybody wants to score or do well within their organization, and everybody has different motivations for that. The second ingredient is to always approach the people you negotiate with as people, not as mere functionaries. It's crucial to establish personal contact with somebody involved in the process, a present or former member of a board or advisory group, or often even better, the secretary of the committee. If the fit does not seem to be good, then don't pursue the partnership or the application. Do not waste your or their time. People really appreciate that. I remember having very frank conversations with foundations and corporations and saying, well, this is really not what we're looking for, and then we move on and come back when we have something that's a better fit. A third ingredient is the realization that institutions can be understood and approached as communities. Visualizing them as such provides an opportunity to utilize ethnographic training and experience to develop and implement successful projects. It's really important to put serious effort into understanding the people, the principles, and the actual workings of the organization, or a government for that matter, a public authority. Just reading the guidelines for applications is generally not enough. Check out annual reports, read board bios, speak with earlier recipients, because doing that kind of research will give you a deeper insight into what really makes them tick. A fourth ingredient, and very important, is to carefully choose the people and organizations you work with. In addition to having the right personnel, with most projects it's useful to build a support structure behind the project. Use advisory boards, steering groups, experts and committees with people who command respect, because that will greatly improve your chances. And perhaps most importantly, when this we forget very easily, don't see smart and critical people as a threat. Include them in your projects as advisors. They may challenge your ego, which is very unpleasant, and I know, but listening to them will make your project better at crucial times. So always invite people that will have a very critical voice within your project to be inside the project. A fifth ingredient is to create a convincing organizational structure, budget, and timeline for the project. People judging your proposal will look very critically at this, and it is their job to decide where the money or support is likely to be best spent. The budget has to be realistic and transparent and clearly linked to the actions and goals you outline in the text of the proposal. I was in the Dutch Arts Council, and very often I turn to the budget before I turn to the rhetoric, because in a budget people speak truth. If they say we're going to reach 250 schools and they only have 250 stamps in the proposal, you know that the schools are not really going to do anything. So be very aware that your budget is like the score of a project. I love budgets. The sixth ingredient, and possibly the most important one, always be honest in your proposals and do not overclaim. That's not only unethical, but it's also likely to backfire, either in the short term or the long term. Being successful in projects outside of academia and even inside academia to some extent really depends on building up a reputation for credibility. So deliver what you say you will deliver, or over deliver, nobody minds that, but never overclaim, because people will see through that. If you ever conceive or get involved with a very large project, make sure that you do not hurry. Be strategic, be pragmatic, and don't be opportunistic. Take your time, wait for the right moment or circumstances, even if you're understandably eager to see your great idea put into practice. If appropriate or necessary, develop smaller pilot projects to provide proof of concept and make sure that those actually work and that key people learn about them and their outcomes, because that will inspire them to support you further. And during the entire process, keep your mind clear and be aware of how ideas and people and opportunities move over time, and only act when there's a real opening. And this is one of the core ethnographic skills that I think we've all developed. What am I trying to say through all this? I think that ethnomusicologists, we have a repertoire of skills that can serve us within academia and also far beyond. We can use this cocktail while doing fieldwork, either immersed knee-deep in a leech-infested swamp or smartly dressed in a boardroom advocating for support for specific projects. How we shape that potential can only be guided by our own priorities, our sense of responsibility, our ethics, and our courage in recognizing and embracing the opportunities that come our way. And that is an individual choice for everybody and depends on where we are, who we are, how we're connected to other people. On the right side of this slide, I've got two examples. One is the World Music and Dance Center in Rotterdam, a project that took me 13 years to help get up, which has now been open since 2003, bringing together communities as well as education for school children as bachelor's and master's degrees and research all under one roof in Rotterdam. And the bottom photo is of Hatay in Turkey, where we've started working to help the people that survived the earthquake. As you all know, it was one of the worst earthquakes and most destructive earthquakes in 1500 years in that area. 50,000 people died, almost everybody lost their house, and the rebuilding of a sense of well-being, a sense of community, a sense of connectedness to culture is something that's going to take a very, very long time. And we've just started an association, a kind of foundation to support the people of Hatay in having access to their own intangible cultural heritage in order to support the process of healing and returning to normal. If you want more information about that, it's on the next slide. As I mentioned before, this presentation is part of an ongoing development. The most relevant publication you see on the screen here in Voices of the Field, edited by Leon Garcia and Kathleen Weens from 2021. I've also included a reference to the work of Miras that we're doing in Southeast Turkey, if you're interested. Thank you so much for your interest, and I'm open to questions.